Storm drainage system. There's nothing. It's just we just chatty today, huh?
Hi, Suzanne.
Hi, good morning.
Suzanne.
No, we
Is
have,
Michael here?
Yep.
I'm okay. How about you?
Saying something?
I just think, I don't think so.
Morning, Michael. How you doing?
Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
No.
I've called the meeting to order. Roll call,
Test.
please.
Test. Snow's not on.
Chair James Marston,
Here.
Vice Chair Robert Burnham,
Here.
Skylar Kovich,
Here.
Nick Coons,
Here.
Karen Luckett, Michael Rasler,
Here.
Suzanne Tejada,
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez, Brian Damore,
Here.
Daniel Henschke, Sarita King, Well, Sarita is here. Thank you.
Is she online?
I'm here, thank you.
Karen, turn your mic on.
It's on. Done. I just turned it.
Okay, the next item is committee member reports and staff announcements. Do we have any reports or announcements?
Nothing significant. I did want to mention, because I think there was some question today, especially with the weather. It's nice to have the convenience, based on things that come up, of doing meetings remote. It's much more challenging, though, with the public meetings. So I appreciate you all made it here today in spite of the weather. With this type of meeting, public meeting, you really can't just decide on the last minute, hey, I'm just going to log in. You know, at work, that often works just fine, but with the public meetings, we can't do that. If you ever did have a meeting where you knew you were going to be unavailable, there is a way for committee members to participate. Just like with council, sometimes you'll see where a council member participates remotely, but it needs to be known in advance of the publishing of the agenda. And then it's interesting too, I need to get permission all the way up from the administrator's office, but that's just an internal thing. But if you were to participate remotely as a committee member, the location in which you were participating would need to be included in the agenda posting, and that location would need to be made available to somebody from the public, and it would need to be accessible. So it's a bit complicated. I know council members do occasionally do that, but again, I guess I'll say I appreciate that you all made it in here this morning.
I've always wanted to test whether all those council members had accessible houses.
Yeah.
Well, I have one reminder for everybody. It gets a little bit crazy when you first start a term here. You sometimes inherit someone else's term, which had a shorter span. So even though our reports and our documents say you get a 4-year term, we have two people who are the new members, Michael and Karen, whose term is expiring at the end of this year, even though it's not a full 4 years. So sometimes people miss that. So
Yeah. Are you sure it's me, Skylar? Or it's I know Karen and I got on at the same time.
well, yours has got a longer term.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Depends on whose shot they gave you.
Okay.
Yeah, so you took a vacant seat, and Michael and Karen occupied seats that hadn't termed out yet.
Interesting.
We filled in for others.
Okay, so what I want to point out is last year, there was some kind of mix-up with the clerk's office, and we didn't get announcements of the opening. So please check the roster on the website. Make sure that you know that you have a term expiring at the end of December, which means you have to apply back in, July or August or September, somewhere down. I'm sure Sarita will get that information out to us, but I just want to make sure we didn't skip that. We've had a problem before in the past where people didn't realize that their term was expiring. So just check the roster, okay?
Almost happened to me this last term. I found out the day of the last day to reapply. I found out that my term was expiring.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any other comments or announcements?
Bob, did you have something?
No, I have something under public comment. But
Okay, well, before we get to public comment under committee members' reports, I stumbled upon something that might be interesting to the board. Was going through La Cumbra Plaza last week and found the Gwendolyn Strong, or sorry, not the Gwendolyn Strong, the
Fisher?
Yeah, Grace Fisher Foundation was setting up a storefront there, and it's going to be the new home for their programs and services. It's going to have retail space. So they set it up in conjunction with the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation, so both have retail aspect, and they want to set it up as an inclusive art studio and a meeting space for those interested in accessibility. It's a really neat project. I encourage everyone to go check it out.
all right.
Very exciting.
Nick, can you tell me roughly where it is in the plaza?
It's like kitty corner from Williams Sonoma, I think.
Okay,
It's mid plaza on the northeast corner of one of the blocks.
okay. So near, if I get to Williams-Sonoma, I can find it, right?
Yeah, you shouldn't have
Okay.
any trouble finding it.
All right, thanks for that update.
Yeah.
Is it open now, or are they just working on it?
Well, I found an article on the Independent that was written in December saying that it was coming soon. It looked to me like they had mostly completed any remodeling they were going to do. It was a bright, warm, inviting place. There was a few people. It looked like maybe they were getting set up for an event. But I think it is currently open. I don't know their hours and days. So check on their website maybe.
All right,
I'd like to, I don't know if this is the place, but I'd like to say that being that I walk Shoreline Park twice a day, I've noticed a lot of violations of bicycles and electric bikes, and that seems to be a walkway that a lot of handicapped people use because it's nice for strolling.
Yes,
I've
used it
seen
myself, too.
walkers, canes, wheelchairs, moms with baby strollers, and I see electric bikes going through in mass groups, and I'm hoping at some point we can address that in this meeting with someone from the city.
were you able to get a hold of Ms. Zachary yet about that? Did you get a hold of Jill Zachary?
I called and I
Okay.
didn't
All
get
right.
anywhere, so
Okay,
that's
we'll
something
talk
we
about
might
it.
want
Okay.
to have her come in and discuss.
I think there's a great bike path along there, so I think that the city, no, there's no bike path in this.
Oh, in the street,
Yeah,
yes.
right. So there is an alternate for the bicyclists, and it sounds to me like it's an enforcement issue.
Yeah, we could have a Shoreline Park ad hoc committee. I think there are three of
Well,
us. who
I don't
go
see
there a lot.
the point. It's really only marginally related to accessibility, and the city has implemented a fantastic solution. There is a bike path, and it's just getting public awareness and enforcement. And-
Well, it's also a lot of tourist attractions, bicycle rental companies that,
Yeah, some signage,
yeah.
just some simple, basic
there's
signage.
signage there.
Is
It's
there-
2 inches high. I measured it and took a picture. If you're going 20 or 30 miles an hour, you're not going to see a 2-inch
So,
sign.
appropriate
There's
signage.
There's
at the
not enough
front.
signage and there's no enforcement.
The
So-
enforcement issue, we already know is, a difficulty just in terms of staffing, just in terms of numbers. And that's pervasive, pick whatever issue you want, enforcement, is a
Right.
part of it. So we know where that stands.
then-
But I'm thinking of
Right.
what can be done to actually have an
Right, more
impact.
signage,
Complaining about the same
maybe a
thing that is not,
ranger.
complaining about the same thing that is not fixable by us and right now by the city doesn't move anything anywhere. So what are the plausible alternatives? So larger signage, perhaps. There are other, and I'm not sure how enforcement works throughout, but there are, a number of different volunteer and other I'm thinking like the yellow shirts, the red shirt, people, that are downtown assisting and helping in a volunteer
Right,
capacity.
maybe when we have the city come in, we can talk
You know,
about that.
they could perhaps be involved in that in some way. But, I think it's just important to move forward, solution-wise, and to continually point to the one issue that we all know, cannot be addressed without new hires, without additional staff. It's just incredibly frustrating. But so
Or
what,
moving staff around,
perhaps moving staff
or
around?
having the rangers stop by. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying hire one full-timer. I'm saying, some of those
I'm just saying
solutions.
enforcement. We just know enforcement is problematic, especially, this committee sees it perhaps more than any other because of what we deal with and
Maybe
how
we should put this
pervasive
on a
it is.
future agenda.
It should be, because then, enforcement itself is an issue we ought to be talking about, as opposed to just, it's an add-on to everything we do talk about.
Yeah.
Well, let's put that on the next agenda, and maybe Brian could talk to Jill Zachary and see what they're willing to do now. Would you mind, Brian?
One of the things I was thinking about for future agendas, and it's always good, as we're hitting a new year to think ahead what we can do with this committee, but every department has an ADA liaison. I don't know the last time you've heard from a lot of the other departments, and so I was thinking it would be good. I mean, we have a lot of departments, so it would be a lot to bring them all in at once, but at least, there's 3 more regularly scheduled meetings for this year. We could look at maybe bringing in ones where there's potential overlapping functions and bring in, like maybe waterfront and airport could come in together. And Parks and Rec, I'm not sure where the overlap is there. There is a lot with Public Works, but figuring out which of the liaisons to bring in over the course of the next few meetings and being able to have conversations about things like this and other issues.
Maybe Parks and Waterfront together might be
Yes,
some overlap.
that's true.
Because Waterfront has a enforcement element.
And Brian, I brought this up before, but many of the ADA liaisons have said they have no or little training, and we've talked to Rebecca Bjork about that. So it might be nice if they just, I like your idea of having them coming in, but I would like to see a written report from them now, or for the next meeting, just say what they think their job is and what they're working on.
Yeah, we
Because-
talked about maybe an in-service to the city or maybe the heads of department
Yeah.
as far as what we do and what we need for accessibility. Maybe a luncheon or just an hour-long talk. Because I just don't like this, well, it's someone else's job and that someone says someone else and then we go in this merry-go-round like I started to do with the Parks Department. We'll check maintenance, we'll check ranger, we'll, go back to the first person, and then we go around the merry-go-round again.
All right. Item 4, public comments. Anyone can make a comment that's not related to any of the agenda items.
Jim, this is Bob. I didn't fill out a speaker slip, but I don't want to go into too much detail, but you and Brian received an email from me regarding an encounter I had on State Street on Saturday night, February 18th. I won't go into the detail, but it was a severe problem getting through barricades set up by the film festival. So I wanted to ask Brian and Raymond or Sarita, whoever, I would like to be put in touch with the events coordinator, either for the film festival or for the city at large, and speak with that person directly regarding my experience, because they need to know the problem that they created with those barricades.
Actually,
So,
Bob,
go ahead, Jim.
I would love to add the events coordinator to the list of staff that comes and presents, because I think it's
Yes.
a bigger picture than this one event. And,
I agree, yes. Okay, so Brian, just for follow-up, please, I would like to be put in touch with that person or persons, whoever they are.
Committee member Burnham, I've made note of that suggestion. I've been in touch with the special events coordinator. Her name is Sarah Knowles. She's housed in the Parks and Rec department.
Okay.
And she does have the contact information for the folks at the film festival. And this is a recurring setup that they've done every year. So we know this is going to come again next January, February. They come in every year for a permit. We can work with them in advance and hopefully come up with a configuration that doesn't result in this issue. And it's not just pedestrians. I've encountered it myself on a bike because I ride my bike home almost every day up State Street. And I don't know if I wasn't paying attention, didn't see the signage or whatever, but you get halfway up that block and then you're totally blocked off.
You're trapped, yeah.
It's an inconvenience for me, but for others, it's more than just a minor inconvenience.
Yeah, it's
So-
an unsafe path of travel. And just one point I'd like to bring up is that these barricades are way more solid and well constructed than the cones and tape that construction sites use to block off a construction zone. And the irony of that just hit me. These are way better barricades than construction sites.
Thank you, Bob. Are there any, Raymond, are there any public comments?
There are no other public comments.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item is approval of the minutes. We have 2 minutes to discuss and approve. One is from the November 18th meeting, and the other one is from the special meeting on January 25th. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes at all? I'll take that as a no, and I'll
Motion.
take a motion to,
Motion to approve the minutes?
you have to do it for each one, so.
Motion to approve the minutes from November 18th, 2022, and the special meeting on January 25, 2023.
But we have to do them separately.
Nope.
Okay,
So November
Motion.
18th, I'll second that motion.
okay. And in the interest of time, is there anyone who does not approve of those minutes?
I would, I want to abstain from the November 18th meeting because I missed half of it, so I wasn't here for half
Okay.
of it.
But, well, do you abstain if you have read the minutes but not been there?
If you
Both.
review the minutes, you can vote on the minutes.
I'm sorry, what was that, Sarita?
If you've reviewed the minutes,
Okay.
you're allowed to vote on the minutes. You don't have to have been present at the meeting.
You don't have to vote if you're not comfortable with it. In my experience, if I've not been at a meeting, I don't know if I can reconcile the events of the meeting versus the notes, and so I generally abstain if I've not been there.
Okay. I'm just looking for anyone who does not approve the minutes. So I think there's no one who doesn't approve them. Okay, I'll entertain a motion for the meetings for the special meeting on January 25.
And Jim, I'll abstain from that vote because I was not present.
Okay, we need a motion first.
Motion to approve the special meeting of January 25, 2023.
And I'll second that. Okay, in the same regards, are there any comments about that? We were told no, so is there anyone who does not want to approve the minutes for the special meeting of January 25th? All right, so those are approved unanimously. Thank you.
Yeah, I abstain as well. I was not there.
Okay, the next item is the yearly chair and vice chair election. Does anyone want to be included there, or are there any nominations for the chair and vice chair?
Jim, I'd like to nominate you for chair, if you're willing.
I would be willing. Are there any other nominations for chair?
I would be happy and proud to second the nomination.
Okay, if there's no other nominations, then we'll have a roll call vote then.
Suzanne Tejada,
Aye.
Michael Rasler,
Aye.
Karen Luckett, Nick Kuntz,
Aye.
Skylar Kovich,
Aye.
Robert Burnham,
Aye.
James Marston.
Aye. Okay, same thing for the vice chair. Right now, it's Robert Barnum. Does anyone have a nomination for anyone else?
I'd be happy to nominate just about anybody who wanted the role. Is there anybody who wants the role? Bob, do you want to continue?
I'd be happy to, but if someone else would like to serve as vice chair, I'd be happy to step aside.
Do I hear any other?
Volunteers?
Okay,
All right.
I guess we're stuck. Can you, Raymond, can you have a roll call, please?
Suckers. Oh,
We have to motion.
Suzanne Tejada,
Aye.
Michael Rasler,
Aye.
Karen Luckett,
Aye.
Nick Kuntz,
aye.
Skylar Kovich,
Aye.
Robert Burnham,
Aye.
James Marston.
Aye. Okay, the next item is the building and safety. People are here. This is going to be great. We've been wanting to talk to you guys a lot. And we have two speakers, Emil and Tim. They're going to talk about what we can do to increase safety and compliance on private property. Remember, everybody, these guys don't work in the public right of way. So this is all for the public or the private property in the town.
Excuse me, Chair Marston? We skipped the ADA coordinators report.
I can barely hear you.
You skipped the ADA coordinator's report.
Oh, geez.
You did.
We'll just flip them. Just flip 'em.
Okay, sorry about that. Visually impaired idiot here, okay. We'll go back to number 7 after this.
Let's see, I'm Tim Dunn with Building and Safety.
Morning, Tim.
Thank you for having us here. I am the Inspection Plan Check Supervisor. And to my right,
I am Emil Delanian, Building and Safety Code Compliance Supervisor.
so we were asked today to basically provide the means of how you would file a concern or complaint with code enforcement. And could we have next screen, please? I think we had a little.
Raymond, is that
There we
screen also
go.
on these monitors here? Is that screen on these monitors in front of us?
No, just the monitors on the wall.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Dunn, if you'd be so kind, if you're showing things on the screen, please audio describe them as meticulously as you can.
I would love to. So on screen, we didn't provide a huge PowerPoint presentation. We thought that you would have questions for us, questions and answers. Currently on the screen, it states introduction, and then we have Emil Delanian's name, EMILDILANIAN dash Code Compliance Supervisor. And underneath his name is my name. I'm Tim Dunn, TIMDUNN, and I'm the Inspection / Plan Check Supervisor. Next screen. Let's see, I'm going in reverse. And so what we have on the next screen is it states at the very top, questions, please contact. And the best way always, I believe, to contact us and provide questions or concerns or complaints is through the first contact. And the first contact is CDCODECOMPLIANCE at SANTABARBARACA.gov. And that is stated as one word, CD Code Compliance at SantaBarbaraCA.gov. For questions or concerns about code compliance / code enforcement, I would use the first contact of an email because you can really spell out what your question is. We do have, for those that would like to use the telephone, we have the telephone number in parentheses 805-897-2676. and that is our code compliance line that we review daily or every other day. And we go through the code compliance phone line, and we write down information from customers within the city that have concerns about code enforcement concerns or cases on private property. I just want to make sure that it was brought up earlier that building and safety is involved in construction of new structures, alterations, maintenance of structures on private property, and grading and stormwater, and of course, accessibility from Title 24, Chapters 11A and 11B. That's what we review and regulate. We stop at the sidewalk, which is Public Works, and that would be Brian's team. So with that, is there any questions, general questions that you have that we could help answer? And if we can't answer now, we can always get back to you.
Mr. Dunn, this is Mr. Burnham. I'll give you a scenario. Say I'm coming downtown, and I don't drive, but say we're driving, and I have a placard that I can use for a disability, and I want to park close to my event, but there's no public parking, but I find a private lot for a bank or another entity that's a private, and I park in there with my placard. Am I susceptible to being towed or fined in some way?
So if you're talking about the vehicle code, we are definitely not experts in the city vehicular code.
If I may, we had presentations from Santa Barbara Police Department in the past, and it was their position that you were entitled to use those ADA parking spaces.
Thank you. Okay.
I have a question. So are you over residential or commercial or both?
Thank you for the question. So when I stated that we review and regulate private properties, it would be residential and commercial. That is correct.
Both of them? Okay.
Both of them, yes.
Okay, so let's say we have a restaurant on State Street that has an elevator, and the elevator is not accessible to a handicapped person to access a bathroom on a sort of a second level. Is that a code violation that you can do something about?
Sure. So if I understand the question, there's a restaurant and it is on a secondary or third level, and
The restaurant is on street level, but the bathroom is up about 3 or 4 stairs on a different level for someone in a wheelchair, and there's an elevator, but it's blocked, so it's not accessible.
okay, so we have let me rephrase that. We have a restaurant on the first floor, and then we have bathrooms on second or third floor. And then the only way to access the bathrooms is through the elevator, and the elevator is not functioning.
Well, it's blocked. It might be
blocked.
functioning, but it's blocked off with other restaurant furniture.
It's being used as a bus station.
Okay, so for us, when you permit let's say a restaurant, you provide plans that show the accessible route from the public right-of-way, from the parking lot, and from the bathrooms. And so you are regulated by law to continue and maintain that pathway from that restaurant to those bathrooms. If the pathway is being blocked in some form or function, then yes, that would be a violation. And you could either call us or provide a email at CD Code Compliance with the information that you stated to us, and then we would put it, we would get there as soon as we can to work with the tenant and work with the owner. Sometimes it's just about education, just to let them know that you have to keep this pathway open. There's actually two things that I would be concerned about. Would be accessibility for the route of accessibility and for the route of egress if they're blocking egress. So you're correct, there could possibly be a violation, and if you sent that to us as a concern, we would contact the owner and go out to the site.
Okay, so besides contact and education, what if they correct it maybe for a short time and then they revert back to, is there a step 2, step 3 of a violation, a fine, whatever? What's the process? Because the problem is, the inspector comes out, they fix it, and then, a couple weeks later, they just like, well, he's gone.
Yeah, great question. So in my 24 years of doing this, we do have a process, and a process is to investigate first. And if we find that there are violations, we try to work with the tenant or the building owner to rectify those problems first. If we cannot, then we write a notice of violation. And the notice of violations are highly detailed with photos, descriptions of the investigation. And then the notice of violation is attached to the property. If for the most part, most people will, once they get a notice of violation, they will fix it. We have instances where people fix it and we get a phone call a week or 2 weeks later? That happens, and it happens all the time. Not just in accessibility. We will provide stop work to people and they will continue working. We go back the next day, provide a stop work. I remember just recently we provided an individual 4 stop works. They would not stop. So we do have that problem. There is a process that we have to go through, but that is a problem, that is correct.
I mean, is there a fine involved for multiple violations at some point?
We can, one of our tools that we do have is citations, and that is correct. And
Okay.
So if we believe that the tenant or the owner is not working correctly with us, we can provide a
Yeah,
citation.
it seems like you're a little hesitant to do violations, fines, though. Is that correct?
No, it's in our toolbox. We
Okay.
specifically, I think years ago, we actually raised the value of the violations.
Okay.
And it seems to get people's attention.
Thank you, Tim. I want to clarify a bit. Instead of an elevator to a second floor, it's really, most of the problems have been these chair lifts that take you up 2 or 3 steps. And in many restaurants that we've all run into, they just block that and have it, like Nick said, a wait station, or they keep your towels and silverware there, and it's completely blocked. And we also have the same problem with the lowered bar rails that are required for wheelchair access. And oftentimes that turns out to be the bartender service area, and it's blocked. So these 2 problems happen a lot, and we would like to know that the city can actually work on that quickly, because this is not what the plans were approved to have this accessibility, right? And yet they're not keeping it.
That is correct. And so what we spoke about previously is once you permit something with a set of plans, you have to maintain it to that set of plans. And so you were talking about a chairlift, and hypothetically, if the chairlift, they're using it as hanging their towels or equipment, or they do not have the proper 30 by 48 inch space right next to it for somebody to access the chairlift, they must maintain it to their plans. So if they're not maintaining it to their plans, then yes, that would be a violation, and that would be a violation that you would send in through our email or call us at our phone number.
Mr. Dunn, can you give me an idea what the current backlog is on investigations for code violations?
I'm going to let Emil speak to that.
So we have and this is a revolving number.
Yeah.
I'd say we are receiving anywhere between 2 to 8 complaints a day. It could be more, but on an average, about 8 complaints a day on different topics, different issues. But collectively, we have right around just above 1,500 cases that are open and active. And these are both zoning cases and building cases.
Okay. And what's the rate at which those cases are, I don't know, resolved in some way?
Good question. The resolution to most violations take a considerable amount of time
Yeah.
on staff's end, on abatement, from the owner, depending on the severity of the violation and what they have to do to abate. If it's related to obtaining a permit for a addition or a remodel that they have performed without a permit, obviously the preparation of the plans, submittal to the planning department, consultation.
Let me restate my question. Is that 1,500 number something that over months or years you've seen steadily going up?
I have been here as a new code compliance supervisor for a year. Actually, next Monday would be my anniversary. So over the time that I've been here, it has definitely increased.
Okay. Can you give me an idea of what it was a year ago?
Almost 1,300.
Okay. So backlog has increased by 200 in a year. I know we were all encouraged when we heard that we were getting code compliance, so we had hoped that number might shrink. It seems to me like we need more code compliance officers. I have some more scenarios similar to what committee member Luckett has shared. I noticed, I think this is kind of the same thing. I just want your confirmation, yes or no. A seating chart. I'm sure to get a permit to open a restaurant, you have to provide a seating chart that shows accessible paths of travel. And in my experience, over time, those seating arrangements change and make it very difficult for me to navigate a restaurant. Is that, yes or no, a code compliance issue that you can enforce upon?
This is Tim. Nick, yes, if the seating has changed, it actually does 2 different things. It changes possibly the path of egress, which is life safety.
Yep.
And it also changes the accessible layout and the minimum requirement of accessible seating for
Yep.
tables and chairs.
So to minimize the work effort on staff, is it possible for the public to get access to those seating charts? I wouldn't want to go into a restaurant and say, wow, it looks like this has changed. It's a lot less accessible to me, and then call you out and have a bunch of staff hours on a investigation that maybe I was wrong. I'd love to be able to see the seating chart and confirm for myself before I send you on a enforcement mission. Is that possible?
Yes, you would go through our records and archives division. So
Okay.
if you go to our website under community development, building and safety, then one of our sections in our division is called archives and records.
Okay.
You could go through them through our website, and you can read a lot of documents online.
Oh.
Plans, you would set up an appointment with archives and records division, and you would get an appointment time to look at plans. Plans are copyrighted because of the stamp that is on them.
Right.
So you would have to set up an appointment, and you could either look at them digitally, or we have some of them in paper, and you would look at those at our lobby, inside of our lobby.
Okay. Is that time intensive for staff when people request to do that?
It's our records and archives department. That's what they do all day.
Okay,
So you're always welcome to come down
great.
and make an appointment for plans. We're here to serve you.
Yeah, and you know, we're just trying to get our needs met here, and we want to do so in the most efficient method possible for everyone. And similarly to the restaurant questions, you know, I see a lot of parking changes that happen without permit, temporarily. Not allowed to do anything temporarily without code compliance, right? But it happens, and happens mostly with valet operators. A restaurant will get in under contract with a valet operator, and then the restaurant tells me, you got to talk to the valet guys. It's their job. And I said, well, no, you've contracted with them. You can tell them what to do and what not to do on your property. And then trying to contact anybody at the valet operator is like, you know, they stonewall you. It's a black box. I frequently see, you know, if you have a configuration in a parking lot where there's two ADA spaces and a common access aisle, they'll stack 3 valet cars in that space and tell me I'm not allowed to drive my vehicle in there. It's at valet only. Police department has told me they can't do that. ADA coordinator has told us that they can't do that. We need, and it's really, there's 2 or 3 valet operators that do this all over town. And we need a method to start enforcing on them. And I wonder what you can advise us on that.
Sure. So you are correct that we spoke previously about whatever a property is permitted for under their plans, they have to keep that, which would be the site improvements, which is your parking lot. So they would have to maintain those open, accessible stalls plus actual access aisle and the path of travel per the plans. If they do not do that, and they're changing the access, or I should say, excuse me, well, they are changing the access. They're changing the use of the parking lot. So that would be, they would have to come in for a permit and a plan check to change the use of the parking lot to a valet parking. There are special requirements, as you know, and as the committee knows, for size and dimension for a valet parking spot. They would have to come in and they would have to provide plans and apply for a permit to do valet parking and change the use of their parking lot.
Just curious, I've been a CEO of a nonprofit organization for, 25 plus years, a couple cities in Santa Barbara, here for the last 13. I've never heard of any valet business, and I think there are only 2 in Santa Barbara, that are substantial and of any means, ever applying for exactly what you're talking about. I've run numerous events, large events, at a variety of different venues, and never once has our valet service included that in the billing or the charge or noted it in any way. And I'm not aware of any restaurant or venue that is aware of what you're talking about. That's just news to me, and I've been doing this a long time.
Sure, it's not something that,
Let me just ask this, I'm sorry to interrupt. Do the valet companies actually come in, or the restaurants and other venues, do they actually come in and submit, the documentation for a different, use of their parking lot? Does that ever happen?
typically if, I'll say typically across the board, if they're doing work in the parking lot, restriping, resurfacing.
I'm talking about for events, like what we're talking about here, where, when there's an event and they're using valet, how many times does the venue or the valet company actually submit that, we're going to change the use of our parking lot for Saturday the 24th?
I don't have any facts or figures that I could comment on for that, but realistically, I don't remember in my lifetime of working in building and safety, a valet company coming in and pulling a permit.
So 24 years, that hasn't happened, but that's what is called for.
What I have seen is that a company, the ownership or the tenant would come in.
Okay.
And provide plans from an architect showing that they wanted to change it to valet parking only, which has requirements in Chapter 11B of Title 24 for valet parking.
Correct. So if they're going to change the parking from, customer parking to valet parking, I get that. When there's an event, a special event, a gala, we have more nonprofits in Santa Barbara than any other city in the country but 4. Right? There are a lot of events in this community. How often, when there is a special event, does the tenant, the owner, the restaurant, the hotel, whatever it might be, actually submit the request you're talking about to change the use of their parking lot?
Currently, I oversee inspections right now. I was the plan check supervisor for some time with the counter cutting permits. During that time, I did not have anyone come in for a temporary permit for valet parking. Not to say it hasn't happened, but just I haven't seen it.
No, fair enough. I think that's just a huge education issue, not only for the restaurants, hotels, and other venues that host events, but for all of the nonprofit and other businesses that utilize those venues for their events, whether it's a private business or a nonprofit fundraiser, whatever it might be. Nick raises an excellent point. And in your work history, not once are you aware of anybody actually following that guideline, that regulation, that rule, that law, that they could then be cited and fined for.
I think a good thing that you stated was education. And for the folks that pull temporary permits for event permits, that would be a wonderful item for us, like a handout for how do you do valet parking? How do you do an accessible valet parking stall? And
How do you do valet and maintain the accessibility for the people that are not, utilizing valet or, want to, take advantage of the accessible parking that's there and supposed to be there?
right, because you all know in the committee there's more than just the valet parking. Then there's the route of travel from the valet parking specialty parking spot where you pull up, then you have the special dimensions for access aisle right next to the vehicle. Then you have to have the route of travel from there to the primary entrance. So it's a bigger conversation, for sure.
Can I ask, probably Mr. Delanian, do you think that a change to the via ordinance would be helpful? I'm thinking that right now, the valet operator doesn't really have any risk, any liability if they offer the service to a restaurant who doesn't apply for a permit. But if we had an ordinance that required the valet operators to see that permit, lest they be subject to fines and liability, that might help with the process of educating. The valet operator would educate the tenant. You have to get a permit. Here's how you do it. Then it goes through you guys. They get the permit, and everybody's needs are met. Whereas today, they all just, it's a calculated risk. We all decide every day how fast we're willing to break the speed limit, right? And that's what's happening here in the valet. And frankly, in many respects, the city's a paper tiger. There's no risk for the tenant or the valet operator today. and it takes a lot of your time trying to enforce something that, you know, it's very difficult to enforce. So is there a code change that you can envision that would improve things for everyone involved?
There's always improvements needed, as far as getting something to be included in an ordinance. It has to go through city council approvals, and reviews on this until it becomes a regulation or a law for the jurisdiction for us to enforce. Even with that, people go through violations, and I don't think valet would be an exemption. They would still go through that. We have laws and regulations right now that are, in the ordinance, and everyone goes through one way or another to bypass those, and that's why we're here. to
Mr.
address
Dunn
them.
or Mr. Delanian,
Yes.
back to your backlog of cases, and I think this is sort of a follow-up to Ms. Luckett's question. Is there any kind of procedure on a case-by-case basis where if the particular owner or tenant is in non-compliance, and then they temporarily come into compliance, and then as soon as, I think was Ms. Luckett was saying, as soon as they leave, they go right back to what they were doing before. Is there any way, any procedure of tracking a revisit of non-compliance in proportion to the severity of a fine or some kind of disciplinary action in place to, to try to prevent that from the recurrence? I'm just curious, is there any kind of procedure in place to track that?
Great question. So generally speaking, and I'm going to make it, present this as a general scenario, any enforcement case that we have, we go through trying to get the ownership or tenants to comply and provide, abatement as reasonably as possible. Unless the violations are abated, the case is not closed. In most cases, on building side, they have to obtain a permit to validate and abate the violations. And as soon as the building permit is signed off for final for that particular case, and it includes all the violations that were stated on the plans per the notice of violation, the case would be closed. Now, once the case is closed and we have the same tenant or owner that goes back and repeats the violation again, we have to be notified. We don't check or have a system in place to re-verify. If a case is closed, the case is closed. If we get a complaint coming back from the public stating that the person has violated the same issue or others, a new case will be opened and a new follow-up will be assigned. I hope that answers your question.
I think the threat of a fine, a big fine early on in the process can maybe get people to comply better. I had a shocking little story my friend told me. He's in LA and he has a handicapped son and he has a handicapped placard. And he parked in handicapped spaces on several occasions, but his placard was on the floor. He ended up getting tickets twice for parking in a handicapped space because he didn't have his placard. This is in LA. There's a lot of people there. Because he got fined twice, he now remembers to put that placard up there. Okay, that fine taught him a lesson really quick. And I think, I mean, as a homeowner, I know, I don't want to be in code, because I know you guys find homeowners. I don't know why we don't find commercial people more early on in the process. We can't play footsies with them. They're violating an ADA law, federal law, And we're, oh, please move, you got to move this, and then they,
Yeah.
I don't think we need a long process. Just say, listen, we're giving you a warning. If we see this again, you get fined X amount. And if we have a number like 1,000 or more, they're not going to do that again. They're not going to put a buffet table in front of an elevator to the bathroom.
I agree. I think that there's a problem with fairness of process, residential versus commercial. I've been red tagged for work without permit. And I see work without permit in restaurants every day in this town, and I've never heard of them being red tagged. They don't care because they know there's nothing's going to happen. When it comes to the valet enforcement, I can't tell you the horrors I've been through. I tried to get police to enforce, and they won't show up. I blocked a parking lot and challenged a valet operator to call the police. They came instantly and threatened to cite me or arrest me, and refused to enforce the vehicle code or my civil rights. I've been looking for solutions within this municipality for 5-7 years. We finally got you guys to come talk to us today. And what I'm hearing is we're welcome to use one of these avenues, but good luck. It's going to be quite a backlog to slog through before you get anywhere. And seems that the message the city is sending the disabled members of this community is you're stuck with civil litigation as a solution. And it's sad.
I would hope that the city could maybe send out some kind of information to all the business owners about this problem. Many places they have a blue space on their private lot, and then they decide to put a picnic table there and have outdoor dining right on the blue space. Those things have been reported and nothing's happened, plus all the problems with the valet that Nick has mentioned. But what I want to really bring out, I mean, everybody wants to think their complaint is important, but there's 1,500 on the table. Many of these things are safety issues for people. It's not like, I don't like that sign, it's too big, or there's a lot of complaints that aren't really safety and don't have a huge deadline on when to fix it. But when I find stairs that aren't striped correctly for the vision impaired, or I see missing tactile domes,
Or a blocked exit route.
yes, or a lowered bar that's not accessible, or even a bar that's not even doesn't even have a lowered bar. Is there any way that we can somehow get you to realize that this is an ADA federal violation? It's not some simple little thing, like I said, a sign ordinance or something.
Yeah.
When we call you, can we get to the top of the line a bit and say, hey, this is important, this is safety, this is going to injure people? I was with Nick one time. We went to a restaurant that he couldn't get to the bathroom. It was raining cats and dogs. He was forced to go across the street in his wheelchair in the rain to use someone else's bathroom and we'd notified this company 2 or 3 times, and they never fixed it. So is there a way that we can somehow get you to realize that these are safety issues oftentimes and need to be at the top of the list?
Is there any sort of prioritization today, or is it first come, first serve?
I can kind of answer that question. So there is no, so the priorities are fire and life safety issues on our side. Faulty electrical, people living in a garage where they can, have no protection whatsoever, with smoke detectors or sprinklers, what have you. So I can say that we look at those first. We want to make sure that people are safe and they would not, suffer injuries or possible death by doing what they have done. Otherwise, we get complaints for hedges, blatant light, shining on buildings. We get fences, we get cars parked in the driveways And then we have the additions and remodels, that involved electrical, plumbing, mechanical, safety issues that potentially could cause fire or loss of life, including water heaters, which, some people may or may not know how to install. So those things we prioritize in our calls and complaints that we receive. And we kind of try to go through them as much as we can to address them.
So if there was an ADA violation that created a health and safety issue, in our opinion, and we were to report it here, what would be the most efficient way for us to get that concern to the fore so that you can evaluate whether or not you agree it's a health and safety issue?
What I always suggest, as Mr. Dunn mentioned, to utilize the email avenue of approach. If there's a photograph that could be attached as to the violation so we can see what it is, and definitely the address of the site where the violation has occurred. That would help us facilitate things, and usually those things, as far as our staff is concerned, would come to me first for review, as far as the commercial end of complaints are concerned, and we will address it.
I want to say one thing is that all of your concerns and complaints are important to us. So everything you're talking about here is very important to us. And I want to say, Nick, that a couple weeks ago I was out at, I can't say the restaurant's name, but I was out at a restaurant because it was a complaint about work without permits. And they had not provided the accessible seating that you're talking about at a bar location. And so that was one of our corrections. We provided a stop work order to the restaurant. And then I provided follow-ups with them, with their architect, to provide the correct seating in the restaurant. And on the same day, I had a vehicle drive through an apartment. So there definitely is quite the varied assortment of code enforcement calls. And I think later on in that day, somebody had hooked up their electrical illegally. So we do have it's very difficult to triage, but we try our best.
Are there certain keywords or phrases, using the email, I understand, that's the best way to go, but in the subject, are there certain keywords or phrases, like any SEO, search engine optimization, algorithm that would just bump it up automatically to priority level?
Or at least get, realize that you may see an email and not see from the nature of the complaint that it may be an H&S issue. If I were to put H&S in the subject heading, would that maybe help clue staff in to look for?
You are more than welcome to state that in the subject line. Health and safety concerns, substandard concerns are addressed fairly quickly, immediately, as per state law, and that varies. We got lead, we have mold issues. It'll be treated as a sort of a final inspection, so to speak, of a building permit.
Well, that's helpful.
So should we maybe use health and safety, ADA violation?
You can,
In our
of
subject
course.
line?
You're welcome to use those, and we will,
And
we'll
would it be helpful
review.
to you?
Of course,
Yeah, okay.
of course.
One more question about what would be helpful to you and staff. I know staffing is an issue citywide, and it sounds to me like your department is not immune to this problem. Is there anything that this committee could do to help you and your team with increasing staffing?
That's a very good question. It's difficult for me to answer because, again, the selection process and the quantity of staff is not something that I can comment on from my end as far as the supervisor for the section. Again, it is completely based on decisions made in council level.
Yeah.
So,
That's exactly what I'm thinking. I would like to advocate at council for, do you have any open requests for employee positions now?
we had and we have gainfully obtained a senior level inspector for
Great.
code compliance. We have, at this point, I would have to consider myself the only person in the staff that will attend to ADA violations if they were to come up, as we have 3 people in the zoning and 1 in the building side. The new employee that's going to be starting with us next Monday will not be versed with ADA as much, but
Do we have any CASPs in your group?
Mr. Tim Dunn is a CASP certified
Great. Did not know that.
member. Yes.
Kind of a delicate question, Mr. Delanian. Personally, or maybe administratively, what would you consider the tipping point between, if I say I wanted to do definitive follow-up on a complaint, how many times do I do that before I become a total nag and a pest, and you kind of, maybe to the point where it just gets blown off? Or what, is there any kind of track you could suggest where I can do definitive follow-up and say, this needs to be resolved? I need to remind you again and again and again. So what is your tipping point as far as, is there a balance there we can achieve in terms of some kind of definitive follow-up?
There's always a balance to be achieved with all complaints. We do have reporting parties that repeatedly reach out for the same, and some of those, I want to say maybe most of those, 95% of those are people who are either restricted from views because of vegetation, or a fence that's been built on the property line that's too high, or it's not without a permit, or the fence is decaying on my side, or they've painted the fence.
How about when a utility raises the telephone poles and obstructs your view of the pier?
That's not in our purview, unfortunately.
Yeah, about 10 years. I'm in that 1,300, 1,500 waiting list to hear back on that.
Yeah, when it comes to utilities, building and safety is not involved in enforcement.
I have a question here. I appreciate your answers here.
Sure.
If we actually sent you a list of problems from the committee, could that get a little bit more attention if we mentioned some health and safety issues that we've seen at restaurants and the private properties? Would that help at all?
We welcome any concerns you have. We'll definitely review it and answer and provide direction as best we can.
But it wouldn't be treated any differently than an individual.
We have to give equal treatment to all.
Yeah.
So,
But, it's
some one person's concern,
yeah.
they may feel it's more important than another's. So we
Yeah.
try to treat everybody the same and equal. And I think you can understand that.
Okay, I have a question. Now, we discussed there's 2 valet companies in Santa Barbara that are frequent violators of designated handicap spaces. Is there any way we can get you to write a letter to them and say there's been multiple complaints against your company? Your employees are not allowing handicapped people to park in this space. They're not allowing them to drive their own car to park. Can we just get a letter from you? And also, I wanted to ask, there's some signage at Shoreline Park that says no bikes, no skateboards, no blah, blah, blah. And it lists the city municipal code, and there's a lot of violators. Tourists frequently don't read the signs, and they see this park with this
public
nice
right-of-way, that's out of
walkway. And so we can't chase down the tourists on a bike going 20 miles an hour, but we can maybe send a letter to the bike rental companies to please inform your customers there are designated bike paths on the street, not to go on pedestrian walkways in the park. Just a letter. Can we get that from you?
So I believe there was a first question before that.
That was about the valet companies and the bike companies.
So when we receive a code complaint or concern from the public or any customer, we do make contact. So when you're talking about a letter, we do make contact with them with emails, phone calls, and we do send letters to them. We have a 10-day access letter where it states, can we come on the property within 10 days?
Okay,
So
can we have
we-
a copy of that letter so maybe we could show it to them? Because I'm sure that some of us have already complained to you, but this continues to be a persistent
I
problem.
think there's a miscommunication here, and I want to try and clarify for Mr. Dunn. We're not asking about the tenant or the property owner. We're asking about these two valet companies who are the repeat offenders. And we're wondering, these, rather than address each individual location where, there's a tenant or a property owner who is engaging these one of two or three valet operators, can we just cut to the chase and start to notify the valet operators of their compliance issues?
I want to butt in and say, I think we talked about this before with Dan Henchy. I think, Brian, you were there. We did talk about just sending a letter to them saying the rules state that you must do X, Y, and Z. Not a complaint, not a violation necessarily, but we need to have the valet operators know for sure the city is going to enforce this, and you cannot be doing this at all.
It's definitely something that we can discuss with the building official and with other departments and divisions that might be involved in the valets. Like there's other departments that provide permits, special event permits. I think that would be helpful to educate through the individuals that give the special permits.
And this is Brian Demore. So as city's ADA coordinator, but also as city engineer, we do encounter valet operations in the right of way. So it's most likely the very same operators that are on the private lots. And they're usually pop-up operations. So I do think there would be some value in drafting a letter that would kind of lay out the ground rules for the very few operators who are out there. So rather than chasing each property owner or restaurant owner or business that's doing valet here and there, we could get, pretty much go straight to the source. I don't know how effective that will be, but it can at least begin some form of an education process and hopefully at least get to know, who do we contact if we see things? Because, a lot of times I've seen with the valet, they've got young guys out there who, it's a part-time job for them. They don't know, they have no idea what the rules are.
Right.
But if somebody in that organization is well aware, hopefully when they're bringing people on board, they're explaining to them the importance.
First of all, greatly appreciate, the offer, and I think education, communication, huge. I think the first time Signature Valet, following the letter, gets a fine for whatever the amount is, they're going to start educating their college students who are all bright enough to understand you don't occupy the blue spaces. It's a color. You can figure this out, guys.
Is there any path to enforcement directly to the valet operators today? It's like playing whack-a-mole with the individual property owners, right? But there's two repeat offending valet operators. And I have not, in 7 years of trying, I've not been able to get anyone within this municipality to take any action. And I don't know if there's even any ordinance that could be enforced against them.
So first, we would start with the complaint. So we'd have to have, we do not drive around the city looking for violations. We are complaint-driven. So if we were to receive a complaint, and I know there's a concern is, well, you're thinking, well, Tim, how fast can you get out there? That's probably part of the problem.
Mr. Dunn, does this official meeting not compromise an official complaint? I mean, we've got several members of here who have complained against these companies. I mean, do we really have to go through the paperwork, or can we not designate this official meeting as an official complaint against these companies?
So,
Do I need to say their names?
so.
We all know who we're talking about
You
here.
have made a complaint that, yes, that we can look into. We receive complaints via phone, email, or during a meeting. I do not know the names of these companies.
Signature and Blue Star.
Thank you.
Brian, I liked your idea about just sending a letter out, and you said, of course, you're in charge of the public right-of-ways, but if you could include in there the rules for private property, and just, not a complaint-driven letter, just a statement, here's the rules that you have to follow, and I want you to be on notice that this is going to go into your permanent record. Can you and Dan Henchy maybe draft something that would be acceptable?
If the letter does not include the consequences of violation, it's meaningless. And until the first time Blue Star or Signature actually receives the citation and the fine, it'll be meaningless. It won't happen a second time if the fine is meaningful. And
So
they,
is
and
there a
they
fine?
will, we don't know.
That's what
I
I'm
don't
trying to
know.
ask of staff. Is there a fine you could issue to a valet operator?
So I think part of the question too was, first off, we enforce Chapter 11B for Title 24. We don't, Building and Safety does not enforce the vehicle code. Just I'm putting that out there. If we were to go out to a site and we noticed that the accessible parking was not accessible, in that point in time, we would provide a notice of violation. And if they didn't adhere to the notice of violation, we could provide a fine. And the fines are in the amounts of $1,000, $2,000, and $3,000.
Is there any opportunity for me to document these violations for you?
So just like Mr. Delanian spoke about, when you make complaints and provide photos, we have complaining parties that do that for us, which is wonderful, is they will take photos along with their email complaint, and that provides a good evidence for us to speak with the owner of the property or the tenant or the individuals that are doing the violations.
Important note, though, when you do take those photos, timestamp them. Because in the case of valet, a complaint will come in, it's going to be at night, because that's when the events are. And the complaint will come in, and maybe it gets seen the next day or the day after, and it's over. And if they go out to check it, they're gone.
Right.
So a photo is evidence huge, but timestamp the photo is key, and that can be set up to go that way.
Yeah, I agree with that, because the type of operation that we're talking about is
In and out.
over.
Yeah, they're in and out.
In a few hours, and we don't work, after 5, and
So Brian,
so we'll have to attend it the next day.
Can you agree to follow up with Dan Hinchke or someone in the city attorney's office to draft a letter to the valet operators outlining their legal requirements both on private property and in the public right-of-way, and outline what the fines will be, and let them know that there's been a number of complaints that have come to your attention. Is that something that we can commit to?
Yes, that's something I could definitely work with the attorney's office on, and I think it would be helpful for any committee members who are aware of specific locations that I could actually include in the letter so that they really know we're watching them and we're aware. At least in the right-of-way, I can think of one that's popped up recently because of the new place right on the corner of, I think it's Ortega and State Street. It seems like every Thursday, Friday night, they've got a little valet operation going on right there on the curb, and don't remember if that's blue or even a red curb. Regardless, it's not in the place that it should be. So
I'd like to officially acknowledge that I have given the building department the Blue Star Valet and the Santa Barbara Valet parking lot numbers to contact them directly. And also, I'd like to make a request that any letter you send out to the valet or the bike rental companies, that we also get to look at that letter so we have access to,
So
what
I
it
just
says.
want to make sure we're clear. We're talking about education. So we don't write fines out to individuals. We do not write fines out for individuals for business practices. We are building and safety, and we work on the building code and violations from that. So if we wanted to look at education for companies, but we do not regulate business practices
Right.
for valet companies.
But what I'm requesting is you did
Yeah.
say that you could write them a letter and remind them of the business code for valet parking.
I talked about a bigger discussion. We can have a bigger discussion with the individuals that provide temporary permits for these venues. They could provide that education. We talked about I talked about when we have a special event permits are given. These special event permits are given by different departments within the city. And I spoke about we could possibly provide education through that. Yes.
Okay. I thought you had said somewhere along the line about a letter to remind them.
So I'll have to, I can't make those decisions as the supervisor, but I can bring those items up, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And back to Brian's offer to do this, and he said he would like to get information from us. So I would ask all the members here within the next week to perhaps send Brian specific areas or locations or violators so he has some real data.
I'm sure I've already done that, Brian.
Well, yeah, but
I mean,
Suzanne, you also
it's really frustrating to have to do the same research. I'll go find the email I've already sent, but I know that I've given you the list of the two offenders and at least a half a dozen locations where you can see it happening daily.
Suzanne also had an issue with the restaurant on Cabrillo. Was it you? Okay, it was someone in the public who addressed me with the valet there that it was occupied and they wouldn't let her park there. So I can forward that to you.
make sure it's, these guys only work on the private property. I think that issue was the public, but
Yeah.
they're both issues.
It was a restaurant. It was a restaurant
But-
on Cabrillo.
But was it
Yeah.
right on the street, though? Or was it in the
It was a
private?
private lot. yeah.
Okay.
Mr. DeMore, would you be so kind to remind me again, which department actually does issue the fines that we're talking about? If it's not Mr. Dunn and Mr. Delanian and
It
your
depends
department.
what the violation is. So the only real clear-cut pathway to fines for violations on this is when it has to do with the California Vehicle Code, and that's a PD enforcement. It's relatively straightforward for them to go issue a citation with fines. When it's not California Vehicle Code, if it's in the right of way, it becomes a Public Works enforcement issue, and there isn't as clear cut of a pathway for a fine on that. And I think even with the building and safety thing, it's kind of similar, where whether it's an active project or it's a completed project, it begins with the outreach process, and I don't know what the mechanism is, whether it's a fine or a citation or a notice of, it's generally starts with some kind of notice of violation, but I don't know the exact mechanism, certainly not on the private side, that could potentially lead to fines.
Yeah,
I just want to share that I'm really disheartened and disappointed that after all these years and these several minutes talking to the top officials involved in a potential solution here, I don't feel any closer to a solution than I have from the start. And I need to step out.
Well, we're running short on time, so I thank you guys for that. Is there anyone that has a public comment? Raymond?
there are no public comments.
Okay. Thank you, guys, and I hope we can get you to realize that some of these things are really safety issues that are a little bit different than just a fence is too ugly. And I hope we can move up on the schedule. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. Now it's time for what I skipped. Brian has his, well, but I didn't get, yeah. The 88 coordinators report,
Yeah,
and then we'll take our break.
and then the transition plan.
We have a break after that, though.
Okay. Thank you for saying that you would, are we on break now?
No?
No. Okay, so on to the ADA Coordinator Report, and I'm going to be brief. I do have some notes here prepared, but I'm going to try to breeze through those given the time and make sure we can have adequate time for the two items that we will hit after the break. Just a couple of quick things. I've been attending the monthly meetings of the California ADA Coordinator Network, and there's a lot of good information available through that network, and it feels to me like they are becoming more well organized, so I think that's only going to help moving forward with that as a resource. So sometimes there's questions, things that come up, and even for the folks in that network who some of them do ADA work on a full-time basis, even for them, sometimes it's there's things to learn almost on a daily basis in this area. So it's a good forum to bring things up. And I know committee members have sometimes brought things to my attention, and I've shared it with that network in the past. It's been helpful. So we had a meeting earlier this month. Don't have any real highlights from that because I think they're in the kind of the reforming stages with some new members in key positions. Let's see, wanted to let you all know that so we had the team from the police station, the design team I think that was in the November meeting, and they are bringing on a CASP. That's an item that's going to council next month. So if people are watching the council agenda, they'll see that. So I would think that sometime later this month, we'll be able to bring that team back with their CASP and hopefully be able to have more detailed discussion about some of the accessibility issues related to that project. So that was good. That was an outcome of having brought them in earlier in the process while there's still time to make tweaks in design. Another thing, wanted to let you all know, I'm going to be attending a webinar on March 2nd. I forget who is putting this on, but it's, the topic is accessible parking and passenger loading zones. That's on March 2nd from 11:30 to 1 o'clock. And there is going to be a live stream available. At this point, I think to participate in the webinar, it's all filled up. But I think there was so much demand that they are going to broadcast it through YouTube. So maybe we'll include that in the minutes. So if committee members are interested in watching that, I will be participating and be able to.
Was that the Cassie webinar?
I am not sure.
Okay.
But we can send that information out as part of the
Thank you, that would be
minutes.
good.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. That's a topic that I can always learn more and see what other agencies folks are doing. I thought it was Access Board, but again, I don't
Could
know.
have been, U.S. Access Board.
Yeah.
And who's the cast member that the police architect brought on?
I don't think they've got one yet, do they?
I actually don't have the name written down, but they did an outreach, and I forget, I want to say it's called like Camarillo CASP Services, if I remember correctly.
I think we know them. Jim?
Yeah, is that our buddy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Karen Lockett. You went to that meeting with the ADA coordinators.
Mm-hmm.
What were their 5 top issues of concern?
I don't think they have a top 5 issues of concern. I think they're more a resource for the members who are throughout the whole state of California. So they aren't themselves necessarily driving the issues.
Are they all city engineers? Or?
They are mostly people like me in the ADA coordinator type of role. Some of them do that on a full-time basis. If they're for a larger agency, that's more common where you'll see that. But other people, it's an additional duty like it is for me. And it's good to talk to the folks out there to see what other agencies are doing and how they are distributing the responsibilities on that. The last thing I wanted to mention is, and this isn't something we heard from the folks who were just in here from.
We have the wrong agenda up on the screen. Can we get that?
Oh, nice catch. Thank you, Nick. Let's see, how did that happen? Maybe it's just the date that's wrong?
I don't see Mr. Delanian or,
Yeah, they're there, building and safety for information, 1020, number 7, bottom number 7.
oh, got it, okay.
The date was definitely wrong.
Okay, sorry
So,
about that.
no. I'd rather be corrected and at least have it right moving forward. So, all right. The last thing I wanted to mention, community development is bringing in a CASP to do some internal training. It's a 7-hour training, 2 days of 7 hours, so it's actually 14 hours of training. John Caparelli, I'm not familiar with him, but he's a PE and a CASP, so he's going to be coming in. I've been invited to attend, and I said yes immediately. I don't care what's on my calendar. I'll move things around. So that's great. It's not going to be until after July 1st. I think they probably have to wait for budget to get appropriated, but I look forward to that. I think that should be a good opportunity. I always like the internal, bring somebody in. If that was a webinar, 7 hours, 2 days in a row, I think I'd be fried by the end of that, staring at the screen. So I'm glad they're bringing him in.
And is that just for the staff members from community development?
They did outreach to Public Works, so they're hoping to save
Okay.
a bunch of seats for Public Works staff to attend as well. I don't know if they've reached out to other departments.
He is very, very good. He's a
Okay.
good speaker and really is knowledgeable.
Great. Look forward to it even more then. Yeah, I think that's it. I want to save time for the other two items and make sure we have a chance for a quick
Okay.
break.
Thank you, Brian. I'm sorry I skipped you. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. See you back here at 11:10. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
going to hear from Brian about the ADA transition plan.
Yes, thank you, Chair Marston. Welcome once again to being chair for another year. Appreciate your service in that role. Trying to get the item up here. This is ADA transition plan update. This should be pretty quick. I think we can get pretty much back on schedule with our agenda. This is an update from, unmute the room. Should I wait? Okay. Apparently the room has been muted, so they can't hear us on the recording.
I'm calling City TV right now.
Should I keep talking until you discover that we are no longer muted? No longer muted. Okay, great. Okay. So this should be pretty quick. It's a follow-up update based on the special meeting that we had last month on the transition plan update. So last month was the special meeting. The committee made the motion for city to hire a CASP to update the 2008 plan for the priority locations, which are City Hall, Central Library, East Side Library, Cabrillo Pavilion, this building here at Garden Street, West Side Community Center, Mackenzie Park, and Alice Keck Park Memorial Gardens. What's not listed is the police station, because we will be moving out of that location with the new facility well on its way in design. So next steps, I've got a rough schedule here. So today, this morning, we had a request for proposals that was issued, and that's listed on the city's website. So I will be reaching out to individual CASPs who would be good candidates to work on that, and hopefully they'll be interested in submitting a proposal. Proposals are due at the end of the month. I see a hand raised. Nick, do you have a suggestion for?
Yeah, I understand Jim Dewey's doing this kind of work privately now, and he's intimately familiar with the city infrastructure, and I think that he should be considered as somebody who would have a tremendous advantage in pulling this together.
All right, I'll make note of that. Thank you for that suggestion. So the end of March, those proposals will be due. It takes us a little bit to then get on the council agenda for awarding a contract, but hopefully that would take place in May. And because of the number of facilities involved and the number of very, what did I say the last time? There was like 2,500 individual items listed. There's a lot to look at. It's going to take some time. I'm hoping that in 4 or 5 months they can have some kind of a draft product that I could share with this committee. And I'm looking at about a 6-month time frame to complete the work. And then with that completed work, we can try to package up individual. I don't want to look at it on like a line item basis. I'd rather look more holistically. If we're going to be doing work at a facility, try to get everything that's done at a certain location. And so we'd be looking at budgets, and I want to work with this committee. I think I say this on the next, well, actually that's a separate thing. I'll get to that in a minute. But my plan is to work through this committee to receive recommendations on what we fund based on the report that we get through the CASP. And this next slide that I have here, I'm sorry this did not go out earlier. Been very busy this week, and this is mostly pretty quick, simple information, but I'll describe it here. I was asked at the last meeting to provide a summary of the funding from the last 3 years in the area of ADA transition plan, and there's 2 different projects that are listed in our capital program related to ADA transition plan. One is called ADA transition plan. The other one is called Walkways and Pathways. And over the last few years, that's been funded through Measure C or through the facilities capital program. And the funding has been typically in the $200,000 to $300,000 annual range. However, last year there were actually $700,000 allocated for these purposes, and the available amount is what I have shown in the last column. Right now, today, there's over $1 million available, which is great. But if you look and you add up the FY21 allocation of $300,000, the FY22 allocation of $350,000, the FY23 allocation, I think I got those numbers all right, it's $1.35 million. So this is telling a story that we haven't been spending the money, and that unfortunately is not, and this is not an exception. We have quite a bit of Measure C funding citywide that has built up a bit as we've been working to get those funds deployed. We've had a lot of vacancies in the capital program areas, and in particular, these projects are often managed by facilities, and they have really a team of 3 engineers, and for most of the last year, they've really only had 1. So they've been struggling to keep up with this work. The good news is, though, there is a lot of funding available. So I'm really eager to get that report from the CASP and then prioritize some work and get these funds to use as they have been intended. If there are any sort of like just do it items, I don't think we need to wait until November, December to get the CASP report, because there is funding available, as I'm showing here.
So I think there was some items that I highlighted at the, by the way, thank you for this. This is great news. Very glad to see that there's money out there. I'm kind of interested, maybe you could follow up after my initial comment here, but what happened in 21 and 22, there wasn't anything but Measure C funding, it looks like, or very little. But there was some low-hanging fruit I highlighted at our special meeting that I think they're not substantial projects. It's picnic tables, it's tree wells, it's signage that's already been identified. That, it's pretty much just to order it and install it kind of thing. It wouldn't be substantial work. So if you would like help, consolidating those suggestions or prioritizing them, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, that would definitely be helpful. And I do want to point out, because we have spent some of the money. If you add this all up, it's $1.35 million, and today we have a little over $1 million available.
327.
It was a lot of the money in 21 that was budgeted was used on Mackenzie Park, and then a little bit of money this year. I went into our system just to see where it's been going. A little bit of money was used this year to upgrade the facility, the bathroom facility right here outside or across the lobby from this meeting room. But mostly the funding that has been allocated in the last few years is still available.
What this shows me is that basically we spent $327,567.92. All of it in 2021, nothing spent last year, and nothing spent thus far this year. Just from the way that reads, we spent 50,000 of the 300,000 in ADA transition plan facilities, and we spent another of the 750,000, 350-ish, in the transition plan Measure C top line, but nothing's been spent for walkways, pathways, Measure C, or facilities. And it doesn't look like anything was spent at all last year. Not assigning any blame, but is there, with COVID, with everything else, there I would imagine must be reasons why, nothing really happened last year in 2022.
Yeah, I don't have specific details on why. I think sometimes funding sits because it's intended to be used on a bigger capital project, and so you may need to accumulate. And I know we did get the library project awarded, but now we've got coming up some work at City Hall. But usually these line items are not intended for those huge multi-million-dollar type of projects. So I think it's been more of a staffing shortage issue more than anything, and we're seeing that story is starting to change. In engineering division, we are more staffed now than we've been in quite a while. We only have 1 or 2 vacancies. It was probably in the 8 to 10 range not very long ago. So it makes a big difference. And with facilities, I mentioned they had those 2 vacancies. They're still vacant, but they went through a recruitment process, and I think they'll have people on board in the next month. There is training, but just having a person you can assign to go, talk to Nick about picnic tables and tree wells, it makes a difference. It's hard for me to be the one trying to do all of that.
New hires is good news to me, and hopefully it'll give you the opportunity to catch up or at least address some of these things that have been out there. And I understand there are a number of projects. I also serve on the PIF, the Player Improvement Fund Committee, and we help with the golf course. And a number of the projects there are multi-year, and we will save money from one year to the next to be able to actually do something meaningful. So I get that completely, and that's certainly plausible. Thank you.
Brian, would you mind doing a line item for the members who can see well on that? Because we're throwing our numbers across, and just to identify things better.
Sure, I'll walk through this slide more specifically. So we're showing the funding that was budgeted in the last 3 years, FY21, FY22, and FY23. For 2 different purposes, one for ADA transition plan and one for what is called walkways and pathways. And there's 2 different types of funding that have been allocated in those years. One is Measure C, and one is a facilities fund, which is sort of a pooled funding source that comes into Public Works, their facilities division. And in FY21, there was $250,000 of ADA Transition Plan Measure C funding budgeted and $50,000 of ADA Transition Plan facilities funding budgeted for a total FY21 budget of $300,000. And as I mentioned before, a lot of that money under the ADA Transition Plan Measure C was used on Mackenzie Park. So most of those funds in FY21 were expended. So most of what we see today is the 22 and 23 funding. So in FY22, again, there was $250,000 of Measure C funding budgeted, and there was also $100,000 of Measure C funding budgeted for walkways and pathways, for a total of $350,000 in FY22. Most of that funding remains available today. In FY23, there was, again, the $250,000 from Measure C for ADA Transition Plan, plus another $250,000 in facilities ADA Transition Plan, for a total of $500,000 under ADA Transition Plan. And then under Walkways and Pathways, it was $100,000, both in Measure C and in facilities, for a total of $200,000. So that was grand total FY23, $700,000, and most of that funding is still available today. The total amount that is available today is about $1,025,000. I guess I'll call out the exact amount. $1,027,567 is what's available today for ADA transition plan type purposes, summing up all of the different sources.
I'm a little concerned about the lack of funding in 21 and 22 outside of Measure C. I'm glad to see we're getting some Measure C funding as promised. I remember distinctly Ms. Shu advocating to this board for support of Measure C, and I voted for it because of the promise of ADA, increased ADA funding. But I'm concerned about why there hasn't been other budgetary funding. In the Title III world, I believe it's Title III, the public accommodations are required to do 20% of every project has to be, a minimum of 20% of every project has to be allocated to accessibility. Unless that project exceeds a threshold of near $300,000, in which case the project has to bring 100% of their accessibility up to code, regardless of cost. And I feel like we're way out of that kind of scope here, or that kind of budget. I think that the city is not budgeting enough for ADA transition plan.
So it should be pointed out, and perhaps I should have said this in the beginning, these are standalone ADA projects. There are a lot more funds than what we see here that have been budgeted for capital improvements that have ADA elements included in them, and some of those projects have a real focus on the ADA elements, like the library elevator project. So that's a multi-million-dollar effort. That doesn't show up here, and there are other projects like that. This was really focused on ADA transition plan funds. I could do a capital update, perhaps at the next meeting, that we look more comprehensively at the entirety of our capital, our city's capital program.
I'd really appreciate that, and I'd also like to know is there any similar percentage criteria like there is for the public accommodations with municipal construction? Are there minimum requirements for ADA expenditure on every project like there is in the public?
I don't know with certainty, but I do know in talking to staff who've been working on projects like a fire station remodel that it appears that we're going through the same process a private project would have to go through with ADA improvements, because we're doing windows or we're doing a new roof.
Brian, I have a quick question. You said, well, Nick brought up the 20% rule, or if it's over the threshold, it has to be 100%. So something like the library with the expensive elevator, are you saying that money is not coming out of the ADA budget, but that's part of the building plan budget?
Most of that was coming from Measure C, or perhaps some general fund, but we haven't touched any of these funds, as far as I'm aware, for that project. It could be used for that purpose, but we try to use these funds for the smaller path of travel type of improvements.
Maybe I stated it wrong, but I thought you agreed that when there's a capital project that requires ADA, that doesn't come out of these funds. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay.
Okay, 2 questions. If we get the elevator in the city hall so Nick can get his wheelchair in there, does that come out of any of those funds?
Again, it could. We have budgeted funds for that project, specifically for that project. If we go out to bid and there's some kind of a shortfall and we need additional funding, and we've got, there's $1 million that haven't been spent, that's going to get targeted as a possibility to make that project whole. And that's, to me, why it's important to use these funds for the intended purpose. Not that it would be against what it was intended for, to move it to a shortfall on a major capital project, but I'd rather not do that. We should have, all of these funds, we should have a game plan for as we go
Okay.
into each fiscal year.
Could any of those funds be used for better signage or some stickers on the sidewalk at Shoreline Park to make it accessible for the handicap who want to stroll there? Like, those little reflective, there used to be some reflective signs on the sidewalk, but they're all worn off there, like no bikes with a X across it.
It could. What I'm hoping we can do as part of this effort, and that's what I have listed here on this next slide, which is pretty much my last slide, will be coming back to the committee with information from the CAS report and then seeking input from the committee regarding the programming of projects. And I really want to be thoughtful about this and really, what's citywide, what's our highest priority need. And this is exactly, I would say, falls into the category of why we have the Access Advisory Committee, to provide input to staff, to give guidance, because I can go out and pick projects. I like doing projects, and for me, it's just fun to get projects done. But I'd rather do a project that I know is going to have the most meaningful impact on the community. And when it comes to accessibility, I need to hear from you all to help me prioritize those things.
Brian, quick couple questions. I would think what Karen was mentioning, the signage along Shoreline, wouldn't that come under pathways and walkways in that part of the transition plan?
That also sounds like something that falls into our sidewalk ad hoc committee.
Yeah.
And I know that there's money there, and that's why the committee was formed, because staff wanted help prioritizing, so we could certainly bring that to Derek Bailey's attention.
Yeah.
And I think I'd like to ask Brian if you could talk, or someone could talk to Jill Zachary at Parks and Recs and just explain Karen's problem to them and see what they can do without going any further. Because it's a Park and Recs requirement, I think. They've been negligent on their signage and on their enforcement. So could you talk to them first and see what they can
Yes,
come up with?
I'll let them know that this has come up now
Okay.
at least more than once here at the committee, and
Okay.
see what they can do.
And I have one other quick question. I appreciate all your work here, but you started at 21. Is there any money from before that we never spent that just kind of disappeared?
Well, when I show the available column, the funds in the capital program roll over. So it's hard to say exactly, when you have available funds, was that FY 18, 19, 20, what money was it? It all just gets
Sure. Okay.
pulled together and rolled over. So that's the available. But the way I look at it, it's mostly 22 and 23 funding, because
Okay.
21 was pretty much spent on Mackenzie.
Thanks for getting all that together.
Yeah.
Brian, my other question is, you mentioned the 9 projects that were in the original ADA transition plan. I was thinking about facilities that particularly cater to seniors and possibly people with disabilities. I was thinking of the Louise Lowry Davis Center, and I know that was undergoing some renovation. Is that in the project list, or what's the update on, what's the status on that?
So that's a project, I know there's been a number of phases of work done there. I don't know the exact status on that particular project. It's being managed out of Parks and Rec right now.
Okay.
But, we could bring, I don't know the last time we heard, the committee has heard from Parks and Rec on their capital programming, but they would be a good
Yeah.
group to bring in.
Yes, please.
Yes, good. Thank you.
So that's all I had. I think there have been a lot of questions asked as I've gone along. So I just want to turn it back to the chair.
Is there public comment?
Are there any public comments on the ADA transition plan?
No, there are no public comments.
Okay.
So I don't need a motion today on this. It was just an update on the
Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
progress.
Thanks. All right, now it's the Access Advisory Committee Annual Report to City Council. Brian, you said you had a quick,
Yeah, this is
Keep going.
a pretty brief slide presentation here, more for my own purpose so I can stay focused. And sorry if there's any confusion on the title, calling it Annual Report to City Council. At the last meeting, there was some discussion, at the last regular meeting, so that was back in November, there was some discussion about recognition. And I think the opportunity that this committee could have to recognize individuals or entities I think that would work well as part of the annual report, which is why I used that label for this particular item. And just a reminder, the AAC resolution, the revised resolution that we worked on, it continues to have similar language from the old one, where it says that the city's ADA coordinator shall report annually to the city council regarding the activities and achievements of the AAC. The last annual report was done October 18th, 2022. Ashley Hsu presented then, as she had been in this seat for most of the calendar year 2022. And some of the things we typically see in that annual report, it's the recent achievements, but also looking at future goals, objectives, priorities, and challenges. So what I heard from some members of the committee was a suggestion about recognition, and what I'm proposing as a way to do this, it would be through the annual report, we could have a section where we recognize individuals or entities who have done noteworthy work within our community to expand opportunities for full participation of persons with disabilities. And I think the way to get there, if we look at a calendar, how can we get to council and have an annual report, assuming that that would be a way that the committee would like to do the recognition. But I was looking backward from September. If we did an annual report to council in September, maybe I'll start with today. So today, if the committee can reach a majority vote on how they want to recognize individuals and or entities, then what we could perhaps do is at the next regular meeting in May, receive nominations from members of the committee, perhaps even members of the public, and then a vote at the following meeting. To me, it seems like it would be challenging to have the nominations and the vote all take place at once. But again, I'm just throwing my ideas out there of what could be possible. In the end, I'm going to turn this over to you all to discuss and think about what would work best. And then, following a vote from the committee, I would include that in the annual report to council, and I would invite the chair and any other members of the committee who are interested in attending that meeting to help with the presentation on that and the recognition portion. Those are just my ideas on how we could do this. If there's a majority interest in doing a recognition, a public recognition for individuals, entities. Again, like I said earlier, I think this is a category where you all can provide good advice to staff because you're out in the community and you know who's doing the good work. So I want to turn it over to the committee to discuss if there are any questions for me. I'm happy to try to answer them, but I see this as something that I'd like you to sort of deliberate on and figure out what might work best.
We can hear from anyone, but I would like Nick to give a quick summary of it. 'Cause this was
I think we got to go to public comment first. That's the agenda. Do we have public comment?
No public comments.
Okay, great.
This is Nick's. Well, I just want to say one thing. I'm a little bit worried about having nominations and voting on public meetings because it could make some enemies out there. So I don't know if it's really a good idea to have us talking about, oh, these things are great, but we're going to vote. This guy's not going to make it anymore. Personally, I don't feel like that should be publicized. and it'd be on the website, it'd be on the video, you know.
Yeah, so,
Most, like at city council, they don't do these kind of votes, right?
I agree, that's gonna be a challenge.
So I would rather have it done not secretly between the committee. Just people could write in their nominations to the staff.
That's where I think we need an ad hoc. Generally speaking, I like this format that we present at the annual report to council. That's a great venue for this. I'm not looking for, a big presentation.
Right.
I'm just wanting to, I came up with this idea. I first wanted to know if everyone here was supportive of the idea of recognizing community members and their efforts to improve inclusion and accessibility. So that would be the first thing that I want to hear from everyone, just, if they think this is worthy of our time.
Nick, I support your idea. I just think it's a better venue to send those privately through Brian with maybe a brief bio or description of why I'm nominating this person and what their achievements have been, but do that through a more
Okay, well, let's get into the
discrete
details
process.
of how, after we find out if there's unanimous or
Yeah.
Is
majority.
there anyone who does not support doing some kind of recognition on a yearly basis?
I would like to add one thing, that maybe we could do a recognition of a public place,
Okay, we can get
Well,
into.
a
We're
private
just- We're just
nonprofit.
first trying to see if anyone doesn't want to have this.
No,
that-
we all want
I think we all think it's
Okay.
unanimous.
So,
And I want Nick
then,
to explain his ideas first, and then we'll have a discussion.
so then just to what you're talking about, who do we want to recognize and how? It becomes the discussion now. And I don't think, I'm not comfortable with us we're out of time already. We're not going to get anywhere today on figuring out how to do this logistically. I really think that we need an ad hoc committee to collect the nominations and deliberate, and then bring that report back to the full committee for approval.
Yes, that's a good idea.
I agree with that, too.
I support that approach and process.
Yeah.
So can we officially have the ad hoc committee then, Brian? Because I don't want to do this in public, I don't think.
I'm trying to wrap my mind around how that works. So the ad hoc committee, I guess we have, we had a sidewalk ad hoc committee recently, and there's 3 members who attend that. So it'd be something like that. Those are supposed to pop up and then go away for a specific purpose. This would be a recurring thing, but it
So
would come up
standing committee?
and go away.
This could be a standing.
The
subcommittee.
standing committees become things that need to be noticed.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
We could just make a new ad hoc committee every year.
you could, exactly. It could be an annual, it just comes up for a couple of months and then it goes away. So I could see that working if it was something the committee was interested in doing. You'd have to figure out who
And
the
as far
3
as
people.
nominations, I want to get everyone involved, so I would hope that the nominations can go through your staff, and then they send those to us with no names on them, not to us, but to the ad hoc committee. So we need to get nominations from everybody.
Yeah, I like that idea of blind nominations.
Yeah. Blind nominations to the staff, sent to whoever's on the ad hoc committee, and then they can do the deliberation and present it at the next meeting on their decisions, and
And I think-
then have a vote.
I think also the ad hoc should be looking at who, not just individually who we're gonna recognize, but in some categories, right? Maybe, I think we should keep it small, 2 or 3, 4 at the most, maybe is my idea, but I think that's the work of the ad hoc committee to figure out. As much as I like this idea, I'm on almost every other ad hoc committee, and I hope somebody else will take this torch and run with it. I will jump in if need be, but
Can we take, sorry, can we take names of people to be on it today, or do we need to create it at the next meeting?
I think we can form the ad hoc today, and,
Okay. Yeah, I'm willing to be on it.
okay. Anybody else interested in being on this ad hoc?
I'll be on it.
I need 3. I guess I'll have to fall on the sword. Again.
Suzanne, are you too busy? I'd like to get someone with a physical disability on this, if Nick doesn't want to, 'cause
I mean, I'm, but
I didn't.
besides
mean-
blindness, okay.
I would like to see one blind person at least on it, someone with a mobility
I
disability.
see, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not sure at this point, I'm clear
okay.
on the recognition and the entities and,
Yeah, I don't think any of us are. We want to figure that out. Is that something you'd be interested in helping figure out?
at this time, I have to say no.
Okay, all right. I will volunteer to work with Skylar and Karen on this, if it pleases the rest of the committee.
And it does.
And I'd like to add if we can do maybe a public place, and then a private nonprofit, and then an individual.
I'd let the ad hoc committee decide that at
Yeah.
your first meeting.
Yep,
But, so do we need a motion for, by someone who's not one of us 3?
we need a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Okay. Anyone opposed? All right, so we form an ad hoc with Nick, Karen, and Skylar to work on how to set up nominations for different people who deserve some recognition, and they'll report back to us with
For
a
the year of
list.
2023.
Yes.
And if nothing else, you can meet on Zoom.
And we can decide whether or not it was worth the effort next year to put
Right.
another ad hoc.
All right. Good enough. Thank you. Subcommittee reports. The first one I have is annual report ad hoc committee, and Karen did a good job there with Bob and Nick, but we don't really have any work yet, but I guess Brian could use some help on setting up the new committee or the new report. So do you want them to start giving some examples to you, or do you have some thoughts? How do you want to use our group?
I think we need an initial meeting just to get.
I'm sorry, what was it? You need a
We
what?
need an initial
Okay.
meeting.
Okay. So you can call that, or they can, why don't someone from that ad hoc committee talk to Brian and see what they can do to help for that upcoming report?
That's another one that's, that ad hoc's been standing for a while, right? Do we want to reappoint every year?
Let's leave it alone until we get in trouble.
Okay. All right.
As Brian said, a true standing committee has to have all sorts of
Yeah, I
notifications.
get it.
And okay.
Actually, I don't see any problem with that one being standing, but maybe Brian has a different view on it. I don't know.
Okay, the next one is the Sidewalk Ad Hoc Committee, and I'm going to turn this over to Nick, who's volunteered to read the report. But I just want to say real quick, this was with Jim Dewey. We had this for quite a few years, but after he left, it fell apart.
Yeah, I didn't need that.
So I notified Derek Bailey, who's now in charge of that,
And then Bob,
and
do you want?
and so he said he would take over. So we had a good Sidewalk Committee ad hoc, and also Brian was there too. What's
Jim,
yours?
take one and pass it around.
I'll sort it for you.
Oh, okay, thank you, Nick.
So I actually printed a report, hoping it would be helpful, and maybe if the committee desires, we could maybe start doing this on all subcommittee reports, and maybe even be able to post them to remind us of the work we've done. But this Access Advisory Committee Sidewalk Ad Hoc Committee report for our visually impaired states that on Friday, February 10th, 2023, from 1 to 2 p.m., the ad hoc committee met with staff via Microsoft Teams. The agenda, item number 1 was staff introductions, and we met Derek Bailey as the acting, in the acting role after Jim Dewey's retirement. Brian was there, returning to his role as the city engineer, and Laura Inez, principal engineer in streets design, was there. We discussed the scope of the ad hoc committee. We reviewed the minutes, recent work performed, and action items. Sorry, those were agenda items 2 and 3. In agenda item 3, review of the minutes, we discussed blue zones and making sure that the blue zones used by the public at large have a landing that can accommodate ramps and lifts. We reviewed our priority list of parkway infill projects adjacent to accessible parking zones. Many have been corrected, and that list will be updated. We discussed sidewalk maintenance. We talked about tree wells and finding the appropriate material to level off tree wells in high-traffic areas like downtown and near public facilities. The city arborist is concerned that the permeability of the Flexipave will decrease over time and starve the tree. So staff will endeavor to identify an appropriate alternative. I have found, since this discussion yesterday, I looked into this concern by the arborist, and I found there are some maintenance techniques that can be used to make sure that the Flexipave stays permeable. And I'm very concerned that the arborist's fears will lead us to this kind of, apoplectic state where we just do nothing because we're afraid to do anything. And I don't want this fear, which seems largely unfounded today, to prevent us from moving forward until another solution is found. I think the concern is, for me, I hear staff saying Flexipave is scary, and we need to find something else. But I don't want us to just stop moving forward with these ADA requirements. Right? This is there is no requirement that we save the tree wells. There is a requirement that we maintain accessibility.
And safety.
Question, when they say in your report, it'll decrease, the arborist is concerned that it'll decrease over time.
Yeah.
What kind of time are we talking about?
I don't know.
Because that to me is a key question.
Yeah.
And I would think, even if it's temporary, put the Flexi Seal in, get it going, and if 6 months or a year, 2 years, 5 years,
Yeah.
Then you take
Yeah.
corrective action. You redo it.
Right.
But there's no reason not to take action today and make these safe.
I agree. I agree very much. And hopefully Brian can take that back to Derek Bailey, or I have shared that.
Especially if the time is over a year. I mean, if it's over,
Yep.
take care of it for a year. Let's make it safe. And by then, maybe there's a new product out. Who knows?
I've shared this view via email yesterday with Derek Bailey. I don't know what will come of it, but I'll report back. And there's the maintenance ideas that I found online is there's a suggestion that with basic hand tools the Flexipave seals right up against the base of the tree, and they're suggesting that you cut out a 1-inch gap between the tree and the Flexipave to allow more water penetration. I also see the tools that are used for lawn aeration, the plugging that opens up holes in a lawn. I don't think that would be expensive or time consuming to aerate the Flexipave, and I don't think it would have a dramatic impact on the accessibility or the longevity of the Flexipave. I think that there's solutions here, and we shouldn't allow ourselves to do nothing because we're afraid to do anything. We talked about the installation of APSs, the accessible pedestrian systems, the push buttons at traffic lights. The cost of the systems are about $6,000 each. The city installs 2 systems per year through its operations budget, plus it installs new systems at new traffic signals that receive major maintenance. The list of APSs and maps of APS locations have been added to the city's accessibility resource page. We talked about engineering inspectors educating contractors to properly close sidewalks during construction. It's a recurring discussion. And then the last agenda item, number 4, is action items for the next meeting. I was to update and prioritize the Parkway infill recommendations adjacent to accessible parking zones. Mr. Bailey was to work with the arborist to find alternatives to FlexiPave or a maintenance solution to address the concerns. And then I reminded Mr. Bailey that, you know, it was staff who asked for this ad hoc committee. This is one of the rare ad hocs where the ad hoc's not driving the initiative. Staff asked for this, and the ad hoc is there to serve and help staff prioritize projects that they want to address. And so I was trying to remind Mr. Bailey that was the model, and that, you know, we're kind of looking for him to bring back recommendations in the future. I'm happy to address priorities, but I'm not as aware of the opportunities in the sidewalk as Public Works may be. I just happened to have this work effort with my evaluating the accessible parking zones that gave me a view into the challenges adjacent to those accessible parking zones that kind of fit the bill. And so I provided that because I thought it was helpful, but I don't have anything new to provide staff.
Thank you very much, Nick. I thought it was a good meeting. Brian, did you learn some stuff there? So,
Can I ask a question?
no.
What is FlexiPave?
FlexiPave is a product, it's a brand name, I think, a product name. You may have seen something similar in playgrounds. It's a recycled rubber product. It's soft and flexible, and it's porous. It's permeable. The concern from the arborist is that silt will accumulate and block the.
So we're looking for a material that could fill the tree well or cover the tree well.
Yes.
To make it level with the pavement.
Yep.
I've seen metal grates.
Yep.
Around trees that have permanent holes. So slats.
The problem here is people steal those, and then the city doesn't replace them.
Is
so-
that what the problem is?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's upheaval, and they're expensive. I think
They're
the advantage to FlexiPave is it's really simple. You know, a 3 or 4 part mixture that they can pour and mix on site, and it's inexpensive, I think, relatively so. And so if we need to budget to replace these every so often, because
What if we can, I mean, I'm not the designer here, but if there are holes within the FlexiPave that we can plan for drainage,
yeah.
to plan that into I'm assuming it'd be like a mixed material that they pour.
Absolutely, and you know, I've seen PVC drain pipe.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, like
yeah.
a hole, like, you
With a
know,
grate
every
and-
12 inches
Yeah.
or whatever to provide water to drain to the roots.
Yeah,
So,
some perforated pipe.
Suzanne, there are some up, you know, the CVS on Calle Reales and State?
Calle Laureles,
yeah,
between
Okay.
State and De La Vina.
If you walk down Calle Reales towards
Delavina?
De La Vina, you'll see them there. That's the first place we put them in.
Okay.
So you might look at that. I
Okay.
actually would rather have the metal grates, but
Yes.
somehow, Brian, what happened? They were being stolen and no one replaced them. And if you can imagine, you know, there are two halves, right? So someone
Yes.
steals one half. You're walking down the street and your foot gets
Yeah.
underneath the other one and bam, you break your ankle. So as Nick said, we're looking at the health of a tree compared to someone breaking their ankle. So, but Brian, is there any possibility just to get metal grates funded by the city and forget this whole thing?
Well, I think that's part of the general sidewalk
Yeah.
maintenance plan, and, you know, whatever material is chosen is kind of up to Derek and his crew to decide upon, but I think it depends on location, right? The metal grates are probably going to be seen as more appropriate in a commercial area where there's a lot more
Supervision.
traffic on it
Right.
and supervision, right?
Okay.
And also probably more standardized geometry where you get out into other places and, you know, tree wells can be very odd shapes, and that's the nice
Yeah.
thing about the FlexiPave. You can
Yes,
adapt it
yes.
to any style. You don't
Right.
have to have custom fabrication of a tree well.
I just want people to know that we're not looking for Plexi
Yeah,
Hey.
flexi pave.
all the time. I would rather have the steel ones but they have to be replaced if they're stolen. They can't just leave them. There's stuff in town that is still gone after 5 or 6 years. There's still no replacement. So,
Yeah, I don't have any particular attachment to FlexiPave.
right.
Mr. Dewey first proposed it and asked for this committee's feedback on it. And I saw it there in my neighborhood on Calle Laureles by CVS, and it seems to fit the bill for me. I like it just as well as a metal grate. I have a suspicion that there's some probably maybe in the historic community who don't like the aesthetics, and so there's probably a little bit of politics behind whether or not we continue with FlexiPave, and I'm open to other things. I just am frustrated by the idea that, oh, we've got to find something else, so we're not going to do anything for another decade.
Brian, could you look into the fact on if the city can just update their metal gratings and make sure they're replaced if they're missing?
I've never seen any. There-
Before our next meeting? And Suzanne, I want to point out that we had a fellow who had a big power chair that was really heavy, and he drove up and down on these, and there was no problem as far as the wheelchair.
Oh, yeah, for
So,
sure.
That worked out
I
fine.
mean, when I was doing retail work, we did that all the time in a shopping mall. It was very common to do it that way.
Which, the fix-it?
The metal grates.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you look around downtown, they're not there in a
No,
lot of
I have never
places.
seen one
And they
there.
don't get replaced. At least, as I would say, drop in some gravel, do something to
Well,
get,
there's also permeable concrete, but that's another complication because
And-
you need to have base and all
right.
this
And
kind of
that
stuff.
also has, according to the arborist, that stuff also gets clogged
Hmm.
up over time.
I would want to disagree.
Well, we'll have, one thing that Nick missed, we're going to have scheduled meetings every 3 months. Before the AAC meeting, we'll have a sidewalk committee. So we should have these back online now. As I said, we dropped off for a while after Jim left. Okay,
I want to.
Can I add one more thing to
please.
this? So many times, these tree wells encroach on the path of travel on a sidewalk, and you cannot get through on a wheelchair, and you end up dipping into it.
right.
So it's not just an inconvenience for not being able to roll over it. Sometimes
Right.
you can't get through.
And I also want to
It's an
point
ADA
out.
path of travel problem.
Yeah, it's been in our transition plan for 30 years in a number of areas, and so we can't just keep making excuses because arborists have unfounded fears.
Yeah. You're right. Because if you look at the ADA transition plan from '08, it talks about this problem, and we still have the problem. So we need to get something done.
Yeah, and one last question, I wonder if the committee sees any value to the handout printed report.
Very much so.
You like that?
Yep.
I would like to know from staff, do you see any problem with providing these online? if I provide you with a digital copy. I'd prefer to give you the digital ahead of time and then have staff print them.
Yeah, could it be part of the agenda?
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. I think I did see this earlier in the week, so it did
Well, it
make
was,
its rounds
there was
somehow.
there was an email from between the ad hoc members that had some of this, but it was Mr. Bailey's notes that I incorporated here with my own. And so I think that it's instructive and helpful for me to be able to go back and look at what we've done, especially when it comes to your annual report to council. We had an ad hoc that was instrumental in drafting that report for Ms. Shu to review and edit, and being able to go back and find what we've worked on was really helpful in putting that list together. And I think I've seen other committees do this, and I don't know. It may be extra work that never happens, but seemed like it might be helpful.
So, Brian, you have no idea, no problem with putting this on our archive, these things?
If we can have it provided to us in time for the agenda posting,
Okay.
that should not be a problem.
But even if, like this one here, can this still go on your archives in our website?
Most likely.
Okay, because I also have one for my next report here. Okay, the second to last one is the outdoor dining and parklets ad hoc. I talked to Brian Bossy, head of Downtown Parking Group, on February 21st. And just to help you out here, there's two major changes that happened since our last meeting as far as parklets. One is that the council approved charging rent for the public right-of-way just on the State Street Promenade, which starts May 1st. And the thought is some people are maybe going to drop out of that. And also, there's some new design specs that were come online February 1st. So those two things have affected a few of the numbers that I gave you last time.
Do those design spec changes have anything to do with accessibility?
Not in particular. They had to do with stormwater management and design of the parklet, but you'll get in
Okay.
you'll see something here that's interesting to me. On the State Street outdoor businesses, 4 businesses are out of compliance. 40 are in compliance. And this is due to design changes, and some lost accessibility. I couldn't get much information from Brian, but somehow when these parklets, remember last time we talked, only 1 parklet was out of compliance on State Street. Now it's 4 according to them. And he told me that this is because the changes that were made during this design change also affected accessibility. So now we have a total of 4 places on the promenade that are not compliant. Now we skip over to the parklets off of State Street. Originally there was 70 parklets, and I reported there was 51 were non-compliant. Now, for some reason, there are 36 businesses that are out of compliance, and 15 are compliant. So now we have, from the numbers I got from Brian, there's now 51 parklets off of State Street, and 15 of them are compliant, and 36 are still not compliant. So that's the facts. The last thing is there's a first administrative citation. Letters were sent on January 30th, and the second follow-up inspection are tentatively scheduled for this week. So that's all I have from the sidewalk or the dining, outdoor dining. So we still have quite a few non-compliance. And then the last group on the agenda is,
You
The-
skipped the blue curb, I think, Jim.
I did.
Oh, Blue Curb.
Licky, so you didn't have much there?
We don't have anything to report on Blue
Okay.
Curb. I guess it did come up with Mr. Bailey during the sidewalk that we, are very appreciative of the recently installed blue curbs in the 000 block, but we would like to revisit the previous conversation about the 100 blocks and work our way out. It's clear to me that the 0-100 blocks were needed and are being used heavily. And that's great. It's a bit of a double-edged sword for me. I'm glad that we got them, but I still can't use them. And so, because they're always occupied. And so, okay, good. We need more. And I think that we need a policy. We need a policy of how frequently they're to be used or installed, or at what ratio. Off street there's a required ratio. On street there should be, and I think that the ProAg has a recommendation, and we don't have to follow ProAg, but forward-thinking liberal city like Santa Barbara could easily adopt a ratio that follows ProAg if they chose to. And I think that there's been downtown parking, or it has been avoiding this conversation for a few years now. That was one of the stated goals of this ad hoc committee, is to get a commitment out of downtown parking for and we don't have to install them all tomorrow or this year. We just want to agree what's an appropriate amount and how do we get there. We need a plan, or we won't get there, and we need a budget, and it takes time to get that budget to council and get it approved. So I would like to ask staff here today to ask downtown parking, Public Works to come back to the table and discuss with the ad hoc committee further expanding the blue curbs in the city.
Good thoughts, Nick. Now, I know some cities have a rule, they want one per block. What does ProAg have? Do you remember?
I don't know.
Do you happen to know, Brian?
I don't, and this is part of why I'm looking forward to the training in just about a week and a half on accessible parking, passenger loading zones. It's a great opportunity to ask these kind of questions, but also hear what other agencies have been doing, and then hopefully get a sense of where the rules and regulations are going, because there is some hesitation to just jumping in and doing things if a future change could come along where you spent all the money and it wasn't quite to the code because they ended up saying it needed to be 22 feet instead of 20 feet. It shouldn't be a reason to do nothing, and I like some of these steps that we've taken where it hasn't been a huge cost from an infrastructure standpoint, but we have created more spaces. It sounds like the demand has shown itself to be true. So if there's more things like that we can continue to do and keep an eye on the regulations and be ready to act with a game plan, with a strategy based on where we think the legislation or the rules may be going. So that's what I hope to learn in that training. And I think depending on what comes out of that, if there's a lot of new information, that might be good opportunities to call together the ad hoc on the blue curb. So look for that, yeah.
That sounds great, Bill. So could you let them know what you've learned at that time? I feel Nick's frustration that we just need to have a agreement that we're going to do something and have so many done per year or whatever the budget can allow, but we need to do something.
Even if ProAg says one per block, Like, you know, I would support a very conservative approach of saying every other block for now, right? Let's make a commitment to make some progress.
Yes. So hopefully after your meeting, we can find out something. Okay, the valet parking ad hoc did not meet, so I'm gonna skip that one unless anyone has something there. Bob, are you trying to talk?
I just have a final comment. I think we already discussed a lot about the valet situation earlier in the meeting. I just wanted to say, as vice chair, I really appreciate our monthly conference calls with Jim and Brian to discuss action items and formulating the agenda for the next meeting. I think they're really helpful in planning between meetings. So I really appreciate that. I
Yes,
just wanted
I
to
do
make
too.
that comment.
And I don't know if Brian was around then, but it used to be years ago, we would get sent to us an agenda made by someone else.
Yeah.
And then the chair had to just read off the agenda. There was no input at all. So we really appreciate having some input.
Yes.
It's still your final decision, but it's nice to be able to have the input. And I think I'm going to close the meeting. This is, the next meeting is Friday, May 19th at
Yes.
9:30 a.m.
Yes.
And thank you, everybody. And
Thank you, Chair.
you're welcome. Did you send this to?
I have not,
Okay.
but I will, and I will endeavor to attempt a formal report and give it to staff ahead of the agenda being published in the future.
And I also, the report I read, I'm going to send to you also. Thank you.